Hi, welcome to the Forks from Closet podcast. I'm James.
I'm Marshall.
And I'm Joe.
And you could find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter,
Spotify, YouTube,
and forksdrumcloset.com.
We hope everyone out there is being safe during this quarantine time. It seems like some different bans are being lifted as of yet. I know here in Tennessee, they've got some phase one businesses that are beginning to open, and we are one of those. Yep. As of May 11th, we are open to the public. I say open in air quotes. 10 to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. We're going to be offering both our regular curbside pickup as well as the option to come into the store.
Few rules like no more than 10 people. There's free demo sticks that you can pick up at the shop. Of course, there's 4 employees in the store at all times, so you can ask any one of them for assistance. Me, James, Joe included in that. We are still offering curbside pickup, as always. If you don't want to come in the store and see our faces, we get that. No offense taken.
Today on the podcast, we have our very own Joe Dorn.
Hi.
Joe, welcome to the show.
Why, thank you. Thank you.
So,
thanks for having me.
To everyone out there who is like, who is this handsome gentleman seated at the table with these two schmucks? Tell us about yourself, sir.
My name is Joe. Joe Dorn. I'm originally from a small town in upstate New York called Clinton, New York. It's about halfway in between Syracuse and Albany. So just give you some landmarks where you might recognize it. Moved to Nashville in 2002. Moved away in 2005 because I hated the place and never wanted to come back. And then I moved back in 2008.
Welcome back, sir.
Why, thank you. Thank you.
So did you start playing drums at a young age?
Kind of. I was very interested at a very young age. I'm much older than people think I am. The first time I really fell in love with drums was I snuck out of my bedroom to watch the opening monologue of The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. And his special guest that night was Buddy Rich. And Buddy Rich and Ed Shaughnessy, who was the house drummer for the Tonight Show band, had a drum battle. And I was mesmerized. So
when did you get into playing?
I started taking lessons in grade school, but I've always been a little bit rebellious, and because they wouldn't teach me on a kit, I was like, screw this, I'm gonna do it on my own, and I didn't even think about it for several years. When I got into high school, my best friend and I, we decided we would start a band. Now, I didn't have a drum set. He had a guitar. I didn't have a drum set, so I started playing the couch. Played the arm in the back of the couch, and that was our first band. Him on guitar, me on the couch, and then we eventually brought in another guitar player, and then I finally bought my first drum
That
set.
other guitar player's like, this couch is not going to work anymore.
Actually, he dug it.
Dude, the tone on these cushions, bro, the tone.
Yeah, it was a solid sounding kit. Yeah, absolutely. That couch had great tone. Like I said, my best friend Jim Hartnett, he was on guitar. He had just bought his guitar. It was a BC Rich copy. I don't even remember who made it. And he had a crate amp that was about this big. And we started playing metal.
Sick.
Yeah.
Thrash metal?
More or less. Yeah, we were both really into Metallica. They were still fairly new. They had been out a couple of years. And
So, Ride the Lightning album?
yeah, about then. Yeah,
Cool.
Yeah. I first got into Kill 'Em All. We were in junior high, and Kill 'Em All came out and blew me away. I'd never heard anything like that before.
Still blows me away.
Still blows me away. It's still my favorite Metallica album. Absolutely. It is just, it's one of those records that just transcends time. It's always good. That's where my heart is, old school thrash, man.
Yeah,
That's what I grew up playing. So, but at 16, I bought my first drum kit. It was a CB700. I bought it for $500. 8 and 10 concert toms, 12, 13 rack toms, and a 14 and an 18 floor tom with a 24-inch kick.
What was the color?
It was piano black. It was a wrap. Eventually, later on, I took the wrap off and refinished it myself. That was kind of the start of a lot of things that I'm sure we'll get into here. But decided that I didn't like the black wrap. It was hard to keep clean. It didn't look classy enough. So I stripped it, put some mahogany stain on it, finished it really nice. It turned out nice. Then I traded it to a bass player that I was playing with at the time for a 67 Vox Wyman bass that I ended up selling for $75 because I needed money for college. So
all that put back into education? Come on, everybody does.
You know it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you sold your CB700 kit.
Sold my CB700.
What was the next one?
Ludwig. Bought in 1988. Let's see, 1988, I was working a warehouse job, and I injured my hand doing something stupid. But workers' compensation gave me a couple $1,000s for lost wages, and I immediately went to the drum shop, and I bought a brand new Ludwig rocker, 12, 13, 16, 22, again, black, and that was my kit for a long time, almost 10 years before I bought the next one. But again, it was a great kit, sounded fantastic, was always was relatively easy to tune. I always had trouble with the 13, so I never played it. I just did 12, 16, 22. And at the time, I was still playing metal. Mm-hmm. And people looked at me kind of weird because I was playing a 3-piece kit and playing metal. And, it was a little odd. Sure. But
you got to break the frame, bud.
You got to break it. You got to step outside the box and kind of make your own path. And, at the time that I was doing that, the Seattle scene hadn't quite come yet. This was by this time early 90s, and we were playing stuff like Slayer, Megadeth, Metallica, of course, Testament, Metal Church, Overkill, things like that. And our guitar player came into rehearsal. We rehearsed in my buddy Jim Hartnett's barn. And he came up to rehearsal one day, and he had a cassette tape with him. And he said, "Boys, this cassette tape," and he's waving it in front of us, "is going to change our lives." He puts it down on the table, and it's Pearl Jam's 10. And in that rehearsal, we sat there and we listened to that tape and immediately changed the type of music we were doing. We went literally overnight from playing thrash to playing alt-rock. Mm-hmm. And our popularity skyrocketed. Yeah. The band that we had started, which was called Floating Noah, eventually began to be like the top, or one of the top bands to see in that area, bar bands. I left the band to continue college, and they carried on, did a 10-year run of being one of the top bands in that area. Wow. To go see.
What college did you go to?
I went to 3. My first attempt at college was right after high school. I went to school for graphic design and advertising. And I lasted a semester because I never went to my classes. I always skipped to do shows at the radio station. I was a DJ, and I had a metal show. And I would take other people's shows. If they had to go study for an exam or something, I'm like, exam? I don't need to study for those, so I'll just take your radio show. So I would do all these other DJs' radio shows and spin records. Still, we had a CD machine. We rarely used it. We'd spin vinyl, and I'd do thrash, metal, punk rock, all that stuff.
Did you have a great radio voice like...
I did. I was the Reaper. The Reaper. So needless to say, I was going to that school on a scholarship, and
not anymore.
Not anymore. I completely lost my scholarship. So I stopped going to school for a while, and I worked for a couple of years doing all sorts of things, everything from working in a music store to I worked for a news company where I would switch out the paperback books at different locations. You'll see the people like at Kroger that do that every once, and I used to do that, except I traveled all over upstate New York doing it. And then that's when I decided, you know what, I think I'm going to go to school for recording. And, because I can minor in music, and I can go for recording, and I can use that as a backup if music doesn't work out for me.
You were already in the broadcast kind of scene.
Yeah, I
as
already.
it is.
In fact, even after I dropped out of college, my best friend, he graduated from the community college we were at. And then he started going to a college up there called Utica College, which is part of Syracuse University. And he was doing a radio show there. So I would get done with my route, and I'd drive to the college, and I would do the radio show with him. His air name was the Wrathchild. So we, once, maybe twice a week, we would do the Reaper and Wrathchild show. And we would spin metal tunes, and we'd spin a lot of local metal, too, because there was a lot of local metal bands up there. I mean, like Jason Bittner is from Albany, and a lot of his bands from that era were making records, and we'd spin a lot of their stuff.
Still right now, the New York rock scene is kick-ass.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Upstate New York has a really strong metal scene. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I think the guys that Danny's playing with, I think they're from Auburn, New York.
Oh, interesting.
And of course, it's all what we would call the Route 5 circuit, because all the clubs seem to be on Route 5, and that's where you would play. Very rarely would you venture out from the Route 5 circuit, because there really wasn't that much. Mm-hmm. But I mean, from Albany to Buffalo, you can play along Route 5, and there's always a bar, club, something willing to have a band. So, yeah, I mean, that area has a lot of great metal. There's it's a really, really strong metal scene, because there's really not a lot to do, and there's a lot of angry people. So,
did you play in New York City?
No, we never. Honestly, the only time, even in my later professional career, the only time I've ever played in New York City, I was part of a choir.
Interesting.
Yeah,
that's cool.
You're a baritone?
Yeah.
Sick.
Yep.
I can see it.
Baritone. But I didn't. All through high school, I didn't really, other than my band, I didn't do music. I didn't march, I didn't do stage band or anything like that. I really don't want to talk bad about anybody, but let's just say that the music director at my high school and I did not get along, from day one.
What high school? What's his name?
Those who know, those who are watching know. But and what everybody that was in stage band or was marching liked him fine. My sister, who's 9 years older than me, she had him for band or whatever, and she marched. But she liked him fine.
Gotcha.
But he and I, we just always butted heads.
So you never did the marching band side of things?
No. I did it once in 7th grade, but that was different school, different band leader, and it just wasn't for me.
The hell
So-
with this.
Yeah.
You said you were going to school for recording. Where was that?
I went to school for recording at the time it was called Finger Lakes Community College in Canandaigua, New York. It is now called Community College of the Finger Lakes. Is that right? No. It's now called Finger Lakes Community College. It was Community College of the Finger Lakes because we used to joke and call it syphilis, CCFL, and it just kind of fantastic 2-year school. My instructor was one of the assistant engineers on Kill 'Em All.
Get out.
Yeah, and great man by the name of Gary Zefting, who has long passed. But there's actually a few guys here in town that actually had him as a teacher too. My buddy Mike Grando went to Finger Lakes. He's actually from Canandaigua, New York. We never met each other. We ran with the same people, but we never met each other until we got to Nashville. And then, but he took recording from Gary. Jeff Lecision, who was Joe Diffie's manager, went to Finger Lakes. He and I graduated together, and he had Gary as a teacher. And there's a few others here in town that have worked with Gary. Gary was a fantastic guy, great teacher, and the fact that he has Metallica stayed at his house during the recording of Kill 'Em All, so lots of great stories.
I can only imagine.
And
what those
if you
stories
read
are.
in the liner notes, there's a line in there in the in the thanks section that says, thanks to Gary, sorry about the house.
You know, Danny's told me about that.
Yeah.
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 That's cool.
And then from there, I graduated there in 92, and I went to State University of New York at Oneonta, which is clear on the other side of the state. And I went there for music business, and I minored in voice. I took private voice lessons and did the school chamber choir, which was an invitation-only choir. And that's where we would play places like New York. We would go on recruiting tours for the college and try to bring high school students in and sign up.
Invitation only.
Yeah.
So when did that bring you down here to the Nash Vegas?
Now, my sister lived here in Nashville from in the mid '80s and lived here until 1991 or 91. And so we would come down here to visit while she lived here. And I fell in love with the city then, and had nothing to do with the music scene at all.
This is before Tempo had been moved down to Nolensville.
Yes.
Understood.
Yeah. Long before Tempo. But I just kind of fell in love with the town. It was kind of cool. Had a cool vibe at the time. Obviously, mid-'80s, completely different vibe than it has right now. But I got to see a lot of the cool places that are still around right now, like the Parthenon, and but especially Fork's Drum Closet. And at the time, it was actually in the closet at Corner Music. And I bought one of those ProMark ratchets, those yellow-handled ratchets. We have one in the toolbox over at the shop. Paul sold it to me. And I remember Paul being extremely grumpy, which...
Paul, we'll have you on here very soon.
Very soon.
and once you get to know and love Paul, you know that the grumpiness, he's not that he's grumpy, he's just Paul.
I have a grumpy story of Paul as well. I think it should happen back in that day too.
Yeah, probably. But I was always like, Fork's a pretty cool place, small as it is, And then, of course, over the years, Forks has grown, and by the time I got here, it was in the location that it was over on 12th Avenue. But yeah, so after college, a buddy of mine from college and we moved to North Carolina. We moved to Charlotte. We sat around one night back home. I was selling cars. He was selling photocopiers or something. And we were commiserating the fact that we hated our jobs and we needed to do something different, get out of New York and find some place where we could grow. So we're drinking Guinness, throwing darts, and we have a map on the dartboard. And we both kind of hit near Charlotte. So he's like, all right, I got 2 weeks vacation coming up. I'm going to go down. I'm going to check it out. I said, okay, cool. And I'm sitting in my cubicle. I was a car salesman. I'm sitting in my cubicle at the dealership, and I get a call on a Saturday. That's my buddy, and he says, I'm here in Charlotte. He's like, let's do it. I said, okay. 2 days later, I turned in my resignation. A week later, I was living in Charlotte. In fact, he still lives there. He and his wife still live in Charlotte, and they love it. They both work for Carolina's Medical Center, or whatever it's called now, Atrium Healthcare, I think is what it's called. They're both fantastic people. I love them to death. And, they've definitely made Charlotte their home. Mm-hmm. And but for both of us, it was really just, let's get the hell out of New York. And obviously, Nashville was in the back of my mind, but I really wasn't playing much at the time, so I wasn't really concerned about coming here.
Right.
I go through,
being that was probably the stigma. It's like, oh, if we're in Nashville, we got to play music or something like that.
Right. And at that point in my life, I seem to go through these phases now that I'm old enough to see patterns in my life. I've gone through these phases before. Where I wasn't interested in drums. I wasn't interested in playing. I hadn't touched my drums in probably 2 years. They were still at my best friend's house in the practice room. Another drummer was using them. Jeff Harrington, who used to be the rep for Soul Tone Cymbals, is also from my hometown. And he was playing for Floating Noah at the time. So it was kind of crazy, yeah. And but he was using my drum set. And then I ran into... I started searching through ads. I got the bug somehow, and I started searching through ads for bands looking for a drummer. And my buddy Dwayne, who he was a youth minister at a church, and he was putting together a rock band. just for himself, you know. And I called him up, knew nothing about him. Turns out he was from Oswego, New York, but he was living in North Carolina. So he and I, we hit it off really well. And, you know, we're still best of friends. He lives in Buffalo now. And we still talk music and still talk of it. In fact, I've gone up there a couple of times and have played on his records. And, you know, always enjoy that. Always enjoy playing with him and hanging out with him. He's a fun hang. So
All these New York transplants.
yeah, it's kind of crazy. And I always seem to find them.
So mid-90s, you're in Charlotte?
In Charlotte, start playing again, just on a very small scale. I was working at an ice rink. I was working at a sheet music store, and just started getting back into it, and gradually started getting different bands that I was playing with. Started hanging out at the local music shop. There's a pattern there too, and my buddy Dwayne is the one that talked me into moving to Nashville when the opportunity came, and he's like, you know, you've always wanted to go. Why don't you go? Okay, all right, fine. And I was producing a radio show at that point. I was producing a radio show in Charlotte, and I got laid off, and I decided, well, what better time? This was 2002.
Good a time as any.
Yeah, so I packed up everything that I had, shoved it in the back of my little red pickup and a little U-Haul trailer, and trudged across the mountains and ended up in Nashville.
Here we are.
Here we are. Immediately upon getting here, I went to Forks. Literally the next day. Like, I got here, I went to bed, I got up, and I went to Forks because I wanted to see what had happened to it. And I was really pleasantly surprised. You know, it had grown quite a bit. Gary, of course, is he's like an older brother to me now. You know, all the years that have passed, and all the people and events that have passed through Forks. I mean, I've seen a lot of it and have been privy to a lot of it because I spent so much time hanging out there. You know, I'd come in and I'd talk to Paul, I'd talk to Alan, I'd talk to Jenny, I'd talk to Clay, I'd talk to Gary, I'd talk to Melissa, you know, and I'd just, like I did when you guys met me, I'd come in and hang out, you know. And I just loved the vibe there, and I always have, you know. And so the first time that I lived here in Nashville, it was a lot different. I had a different mindset coming in, and this would probably be good advice for anybody wanting to come to Nashville is, you know, leave your ego at home. 'Cause I thought I was hot stuff, and I got schooled pretty quick. And you know, I when I left in 2005, like I said, I felt like I hated Nashville and never wanted to see it again. But really, it was just because I didn't get what I wanted out of it. You know, I was being the spoiled brat. Come with your expectations high for yourself. Study, practice, be a good hang. That was something that I hadn't figured out yet. And it took me a couple of years away to figure out what I had done wrong, so that when I came back in 2008, it was a slightly different story.
Because it's not something anybody really falls in. I mean, there are stories of falling into, you know, those kind of situations. But, I mean, the only people I ever play with are friends of friends of friends who I've met before. You know?
Yeah. And that's the big thing that people, probably the biggest misunderstanding or misconception that people have about moving here is, you know, oh, I'm going to kill him with my abilities. No, you're not. There's a million guys here that are better than you, and I will guarantee it. And
Everybody got skills.
Everybody's got skills. And, you know, I was honestly the biggest lesson I had in that. I was running sound at one of the clubs downtown, and the band came on, and the drummer gets on stage, and he's setting up and stuff, and he to me, he didn't look the part, and I thought, you know, what's this guy gonna do? And he got up there and he slayed it. And I went up afterwards and I'm talking to him, and I'm like, so what's your name? He goes, oh, my name is Near Z. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, cool. So it's one, you never know who you're going to run into here. And that shouldn't be the impetus to move here. Move here to do good, move here to further your career and work with some good people and make good friends and good contacts and don't move here just to meet people or run into someone at the supermarket, because that annoys the people here.
It certainly does.
But
Dude, you see Jack White at Kroger like buying eggs. Don't go up and throw him your mixtape, dude.
no,
Don't do it.
No.
A mixtape. Jack, I made this for you.
I got this TDK for you.
Just kidding. Do you think Jack White does his own grocery shopping? Do you think he has somebody who does it for him?
So the first time I got here, I met some really good people before I moved away. One of them being my buddy Mike Zimmerman. He and I have been like brothers for a long time, and he's goofy and crazy and a hell of a drummer. But we kept in contact even after I had moved away. So when I came back in 2008, I'd start hanging out with Mike wherever he was playing, and I started to meet people and started to, get contacts from people that I might want to play with or that might want to play with me. And that's just kind of how it worked,
Well, and back in the day, word of mouth was just
Oh, yeah.
the way, like there isn't posting a drum video about yourself. It's, you got to go out, meet and greet, shake
Right.
hands.
Yeah.
You really never know how far that handshake is going to go, and
Yeah.
how, if you're kind, people
Well,
just,
I mean, for instance, the one of the artists that I was playing with here in town, his name is David Newbold. He's from Canada, obviously lives here now, and he and I'll still play with him occasionally. But we played together pretty solid for about 4 years, and at one point, the incarnation of the band, we had 2 guitars, bass, drums, keyboards, and violin, or fiddle, as they call it here in Nashville. And the keyboard player, who lives just over here, he and I would go drinking after practice, or just kind of hang out and talk. And he was obviously, he'd been around for a while. He'd played with some greats, recorded with some greats.
that's killer.
Phenomenal keyboard player. Well, he and I were drinking whiskey one night in my kitchen, and he says, we're just kind of, I was in one of those moods where I was kind of bitching about stuff, and he just kind of leans back against the counter, and he's like, I need to get you into the Chris Knight gig. And I was like, okay, sure, fine. And 2 weeks later, I get a call from Chris Knight's manager.
That's so cool.
And so I get the call. He's like, so I understand you might be interested in playing. Yeah, sure. And I ended up playing with Chris for almost 3 years.
That's killer.
But met some great guys there, great guitar player. Just had a lot of fun doing that gig.
So you've been a Forks patron long before you were a Forks employee.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've been shopping at Forks and exclusively since '98. Even before, other than the short time that I worked for Guitar Center. It makes me shudder. Even then, when I was able to collect enough money from the meager paycheck that I got at Guitar Center, I would order stuff from Forks, because I had shopped here once in between when my sister lived here in the mid '80s and when I moved here in 2002. I had friends that would live here and move away, and I'd come out and visit or whatever, and I'd make make part of the trip going to Forks. So I got to know Paul and Alan and Gary really well. And so when I moved here in 2002, it just made sense to there was no other place I wanted to go to get my drum stuff. And then then I came back here in 2008 and just again continued to hang out at Forks. And finally last year, I had my own business for about 10 years as a production manager. And I decided to hand it off to one of the people that was working for me, and I was talking to Danny, and we thought we'd give it a shot. So I came on board.
And if I can speak frankly, it has been a pleasure having you at the shop.
It has been a blast being at the shop. So.
You're also quite the historian, just in drums in general. I know I've asked you
I'm kind
plenty.
of a drum geek.
Yeah, I mean, me and you hit it off. I remember much like everyone that started, I was the worst. I had no idea what I was doing when I first started this. I still don't know what I'm doing, but it was nice being able to talk to, someone older than me and just like geek out.
I'm no Gary Forkham or Steve Maxwell. I'm not that knowledgeable about
eras
and stuff, but I know a bit. Over the years, I've owned a lot of stuff. A lot of drums that are long since gone that I wish I still had, and a lot of them were older. And at the time, when I had them, I didn't really appreciate. Like I can't tell you the number of acrylites and superphonics I've owned since 1986. I mean hundreds.
Oh my God.
At various different times, but I'd just sell them.
It's impressive.
I'd be like, I don't need this snare drum anymore, and I'd sell it to someone, or I'd sell a kit, and it would, okay, they need a snare drum with it. I'll just throw in that superphonic, and who cares,
What's in the collection these days?
Oh boy,
I love talking about this because I have an addiction myself to snare drums.
Snare drums are very addictive. Mm-hmm. I'm a huge fan of superphonics and acrylites. I've got 2 acrylites at the shop right now for sale, and it pains me to sell them, but eating kind of requires money, so you got
top 3 snare drums in your collection.
In my collection, I've got, let's see, my top favorite. It's 1969. Ludwig Superphonic 5x14. It was owned by Monty Yoho, who's here in town. He was, or is, the drummer for the band The Outlaws. And this particular drum, he told Derek Lewis, he told Derek that this particular drum was on every Outlaws record, every Henry Paul Band record, and it was on 2 Doobie Brothers records.
The Outlaws, Knoxville Woman.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Greengrass High Tides.
Yeah. I know.
So now it took on really special meaning because the very first concert that I ever went to was the Henry Paul Band. And I haven't talked to Monty about it yet. I keep meaning to send him a message or call him or whatever, but just kind of find out the story. And I really want to know if that snare drum was at that concert. Because then that would just be huge. But with that snare drum, just as he traded it in, is how I played it for 2 years with Chris Knight, because I didn't want to mess with any of the mojo on the drum. And it's the only thing that I've changed. I've changed heads and snare wires on it, but I haven't cleaned it. I did change the throw off because I hate P85s. Sorry, Ludwig, P85s suck.
Luckily, they replaced them with
the P88, which is one of the best throws out there.
Bam.
So, but I, other than adding the P88 and new heads and wires, I haven't cleaned the drum. Mm-hmm. I haven't done like you guys have seen how I clean drums. I haven't done that with this one. It's still as it was. And it will always be as it was. I'm not going to mess with it.
You said that was a 6.5x14?
No, that's a 5x14.
A 5x14.
Yeah, 5x14. Yep.
See, I like 5x14s a little better than I do 6.5s. I don't know why. It's not the look.
Some of those old school ones, for sure.
Yeah.
Like, it's not the look at all. It's definitely more of the way it sounds. I don't know. Because in 6.5 sound great, especially on a
really
superphonic.
Yeah.
But, like, there's something about an aluminum 5 that you just don't
like that Gretsch Grand Prix 5.
Dude, yeah, I love that one.
Sick,
that thing
dude.
sounds
302
awesome.
hoops, nasty.
So that 69. Then I've got my next favorite. I've got a I'm not sure the year on it. but it was part of that estate sale stuff that you guys had. And it's a 4 3/4 by 14 Noble and Cooley Alloy Classic.
The black alloy classic.
Yeah,
Sick.
And that drum, the artist that I'm currently with, I mean, nobody's playing music right now, so it's kind of hard to say you're with any artist or not, because he heard that snare once and he's like, play that every gig. That's the one I want. And I wasn't going to argue because it's a great sounding snare drum.
That's always super refreshing in any band, whether it's the band leader or the band that's like, you should play that one.
Yeah.
I like the way that sounds.
Yeah. And the Alloy Classic is just one of those snare drums. I mean, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of recordings out there of the Alloy Classic in songs you've heard that, you know, and that you have gone, man, that snare drum sounds great. Well, it's probably an Alloy Classic or a Superphonic or a recording custom or a Brady.
Noble and Cooley, the longest running drum manufacturer in history.
Yeah, oldest American drum company, then Gretsch, then Ludwig. But so the Alloy the Superphonic, the Alloy Classic, I've got, and one of my all-time favorite drums, Tama. In 2 periods, they made the same drum. One was slightly different than the other, but from 2002 to 2004, they made a thicker brass-shelled drum that they called the G-Brass. It was the Star Classic. They called it the G-Brass, and it's a 6 by 14, and it's like 1.5 millimeter brass, so it's got some weight to it. I've used it virtually on every recording I've done.
Chrome over brass?
No, it's black nickel over brass.
Oh, cool.
Does it have the black lugs or no?
No,
Sick.
no, they're. It's a very light nickel because it's not like that.
The brushed nickel like they have, it's not like that.
Yeah. It's a little. It looks a little brushed, but I've got one of those. Absolutely love it, and honestly, it's the whole reason I still don't have a Black Beauty, because this drum has done everything that a Black Beauty could have.
Does what you need it to.
Yep, and I've been in sessions where I've brought 5 or 6 snare drums, and the producer always ends up on that drum. So that or a Superphonic. And then I've got a mid-90s Sambaco built Slingerland, the blue.
The teal?
Yeah, the teal,
Yeah.
whatever finish that is, but yeah.
Is it a 4 by 14?
No, that's a 6.5 by 14.
Oh, it's a 6.5?
Yeah, 6.5 by 14. Satin Flame, the blue or teal Satin Flame. That thing is gorgeous and it sounds great. I've recorded with it a couple of times already, and just one of those that I will never take out of my collection. So.
And all those drums do something different.
Yeah.
Know?
Absolutely.
That's cool that you know what all those drums can do.
I'm probably not going to do a metal gig with that Slingerland.
Right.
It's just not the drum.
Although it would be very cool to see that happen.
Yeah, it'd be very
cool.
It'd be very cool for me to get a metal gig again. Hint, hint.
You may not be the expert historian of forks, but I'll just say you're very good at fixing and polishing and making drums tunable and playable again.
Yeah, thank you.
That's been a very nice addition. At
Yeah,
Forks,
that's kind of one of my jobs at the shop. We do have someone that does like the heavy duty repairs. Sam Bacco does our heavy duty repairs. Like if you need a drum shell rebuilt or bearing edges redone, we would send them to Sam Bacco. I don't have that experience yet. He definitely does. I mean, he's been building drums for years. We're still one of the only authorized repair places for Gretsch drums, and that's because of Sam Bacco. And Sam does amazing work. I've seen him patch holes in drums.
He's turned water into wine, I
And
swear.
you can't even see where the hole used to be. It's amazing the work that he does. So the repairs that I do, I'll do, I'll fix a throw. I'll retap threads on a bolt or in something that needs to screw in. I can, make an old drum look brand new. But as far as like structural repairs and things like that, I'm kind of try to push those off to Sam.
You're also quite savvy on the fabrication side as well, if I could say. If you can notice, our microphone stands here were built by our very own Joe Dorn. You should see a video of that coming very soon.
Yeah, we did a video Tuesday. Some not only how-to videos and build videos, but also probably do some product reviews and things like that. Maybe bring my friend Matt Iceman in to help with that too.
Shout out to Matt Iceman.
Matt Iceman.
Joe, you also put together this lovely table for us.
Yeah, this is...
Would you give us a rundown here?
Yeah, this is actually, it's a table. Now, the base for the table is a 22-inch Gretsch Renown bass drum. I used 4 Ludwig Atlas mounts that we had in the parts bins and replaced 4 of the lugs and gave it legs so that we could adjust the height. I got the tabletop at Lowe's, stained it, drilled the hole in the middle of it, kind of put it all together and, kind of made it work.
This is made with love.
It is, because I love the shop and I love what you guys are doing with the podcast. So
and much like yourself, sir, it's well built.
Why, thank you.
My man.
Well, part of that is due to Gretsch. Gretsch builds good stuff.
They do.
The base of the table is Gretsch. I don't know whose floor tom legs they are. I think they're DW, but they look like DW.
They are black DW.
They're 100% DW legs.
It's interesting to me that the Ludwig Atlas fits in a Gretsch bass drum hole spacing.
But yeah, they're universal. So the bottom screw on the Atlas mount is movable, and you can adjust it to virtually any hole spacing. Virtually any.
The more you know.
Yeah.
You work here?
Obviously not.
And then the mic stands, just kind of, James and I were brainstorming one day at the shop, and I was like, I'm thinking about making some mic stands, because rather than have those tall booms, which look kind of awkward, I like the idea of having a cymbal stand as a mic stand.
And having it on the table versus being drilled into the table.
Exactly. So James suggested the CH830 Pearl, and so I kind of looked at it and ran with it. I went up and saw our friends up at Corner Music, and JD gave us a really great deal on the basses. They had 4 Orphan microphone stand basses that they weren't able to sell because nobody wants just the bass.
We'll take them.
So
Thanks, JD.
Thanks, JD. Thanks,
JD.
Corner Music. He hooked us up with those. So and you'll see when we do when you release the first how-to video. I think it'll be the first one.
How it's made with Joe Dorn.
Yeah, how it's made. Yeah, it's. I've always tinkered. When I was a kid, I was a latchkey kid. Mom and dad were divorced. I'd get home from school and I'd be by myself. So and my sister was much older, so she wasn't at the house either. So I would entertain myself by taking apart the toaster, which, much to my mom's dismay, it actually did benefit. I was able to put them back together to where they worked still. And
Joe, the toaster's broken again.
But that got me into just creatively building stuff. And growing up, we didn't have a lot of money either, so a lot of it was improvisation of I need something, how am I going to get it? I can't go out and buy it, so I'll make it. So I've always been tinkering and building and doing something along those lines. Yeah.
Well, man, we appreciate you so much being at the shop and coming out here and talking with us and just being our friend. We love you, bud.
Yeah, I love you guys too. Absolutely.
As always, tag us in your licks, your pics, your videos, your nonsense, whatever you're posting out there on the social media. We'd love to see it. Tag us on Instagram, Facebook. Also, if you have any questions or something you want to see on the podcast, someone you'd like to see on the podcast, any topics, drum related or not, hit us up at podcast@forksdrumcloset.com.
All right, let's jump into these meat and potatoes. We got a question from Lisa Thompson on Instagram.
Hi, Lisa.
She wants to know, how do you record drums on a cheap budget? It's a wonderful question, actually.
Gosh.
I feel like this has been a big discussion just as far as the quarantine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody's got plenty of time to sit at home and write some stuff.
I mean, it all kind of depends on what you're going for. Contrary to popular belief, recording can be done with less than 10 tracks. You know, in back in the day, in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, I mean, you're talking, sometimes only 2 tracks. I mean, until the Beatles did Sgt. Pepper, really nobody had really even considered multi-track recording other than Les Paul, who invented multi-track recording as well as the guitar. But nobody was really doing it. You know, then the Beatles and George Martin, they kind of embraced it, and everyone was like, wow, this is what you can do with that? Because if you put headphones on, you listen to a Beatles record, it's wild.
It's got
it's crazy. And a lot of the techniques that they were doing, a lot of the techniques that they developed turned into standards for the way that we record today. But, you know, even like late 60s, Led Zeppelin, they recorded the drums with 3 microphones. You had one mic at the snare, or maybe not even pointed directly, I mean, kind of away from it. You had a room mic, and you had like a kick drum mic, and that was it. I've done recordings before similarly where I've had snare mic, I've had a large diaphragm 2 feet in front of the kick drum, and then I've had an overhead. And no, you're not going to get true separation of toms, but you're going to get the image of movement. And a lot of stuff you don't really, I mean, especially if it's a small kit, a 4-piece kit, how much movement do you need? You don't need an awful lot of panning on a 4-piece kit because it's just either here or here. It's not like you got 8 toms to kind of fit into there's no sound image that they need to fit into.
For sure. What kind of groove are you playing? Are we just playing
right?
And then
and if that's the case, you only need 2 mics.
Only 2. I would say, if anything, get a 4-channel interface. So just in case that you do run into something where you might need that extra microphone, then your problem is I can't record. It's I gotta buy another microphone.
Yeah, and you know, as far as like if you're talking digitally, then you gotta consider a DAW or a digital audio workstation of some sort. Now there are several programs out there that are free that work wonderfully. GarageBand comes free with every Mac, even iPads. And I mean, Trent Reznor did I don't know how many 9 Inch Nails records and Trent Reznor records with just GarageBand. I mean, some serious stuff that's out on the radio that you've heard that you love has been done with GarageBand. You know, and it's just a matter of getting the sounds into the computer, and that's where an interface comes in. And you can there are some decent ones that aren't going to break the bank. And when you get into the 4-channel ones or the 4-input ones, it gets a little bit pricier, but not much. I mean,
you're up about $200 at least, maybe
150,
maybe 150. Yeah.
Now on the other end of the spectrum, there are some standalone units. Like for instance, Korg made for a while. I don't know if they still make it or not. I don't know if Korg even still around. But they made a portable recording unit. I mean, it was kind of like an all-in-one.
Like a Tascam?
It was kind of like a Tascam, yeah.
I use Tascams all the time.
I mean, I used to use Tascam 4-track cassette.
Those things are great.
They were fantastic for getting ideas down. Hell, even voice memos is great for getting ideas down.
Absolutely. Yeah, use your iPhone if you want to not spend any money.
Yeah.
You know?
And in fact, there are interfaces that you can buy that'll go into your iPhone, your iPad. So you don't even really need to have a good computer. I mean, as long as you got an iPhone or an iPad or a smartphone or a tablet.
But if you're also thinking, you know, longevity, if you're thinking recording something you want to do, you know, maybe spending the extra cash on a 4-channel interface that will interface with your computer directly would be
absolutely
whatever's forwarding your creativity, and it's not more of a hassle to record drums. You know, that's what I find is very frustrating.
At the very least, buy a Shure SM57 for your snare drum. $99. You can get them used for a lot less all over that are still functional, still work fine. those are pretty much the industry standard unless you get into some really high-end stuff. But as far as recording, as far as live performance, the Shure SM57 is the king for snare drum.
57s, 58s, 52 on the kick.
58 sound fine on kick drum, or sound fine on toms. In the past, I've actually used 58s on a kick drum, and it sounded fine. As long as you understand EQ, as long as you understand how to make, because for instance, the frequency response of like a SM58 is around, I believe it's 50 to 18,000 hertz, 50 hertz to 18,000 hertz. And your drums are all within that range. Now you may get some lower frequencies like 35 hertz and stuff out of a microphone that's specifically made for kick drum. But you don't always need those. 35, nobody's really hearing 35 hertz. You're feeling it more than you're hearing it.
I can feel it.
But you can find some great deals on used microphones too. Audix D4, which used to be their kick drum mic, they now kind of pass it off as their floor tom or bass guitar mic, but it was their original kick drum mic, and I've got one in one of my kick drums. I've got a little Premier Janista 18-inch kick drum, and I have a D4 permanently mounted in there because I don't need a D6. I don't need a Beta 52 in that size of kick drum, and it sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Audix D6 is a great mic. Beta 52 is a great mic. Even the AKG D112 is a great mic. But it all depends on the sound that you're going for, and do your research and find the one that's more suited to the music that you're doing. Because if you get a D112 and you don't want an awful lot of attack, you're going to be doing a lot of EQing, getting that attack out, because that's the wheelhouse that microphone sits in. It's great if you want that click, that Lars Ulrich and Justice for All sound.
Right.
Yeah, okay. You can kind of go anywhere you want.
You really can.
It's really more or less, how much do you want to spend? When you have that thought in your head, don't buy new, because I think you're automatically going to be way above your budget.
Yeah, and there are some budget microphones that are great. MXL is, if they're still around, they make some great low-cost condenser microphones. I've got a pencil condenser that I've had modified, but not much. And it's an MXL that I paid $85 for, and it's a wonderful microphone.
Just from seeing a lot of different musicians, everyone tries to buy everything at once, and I find that that's never the idea. Like you should, it's
not unless you're buying with intent. I mean, if you know exactly what you want and you've done the research, okay, I'm gonna buy this, and this today. Okay, cool.
But starting from zero and being like, I want to record drums, that's a large chunk.
Yeah.
Very, very.
You gotta get a kit.
Highly recommend, like I said, the SM57. Get a decent pencil condenser to kind of capture, your hi-hat and some mid-level stuff, and then an overhead mic, some sort of large diaphragm, and you can get some wonderful drum sounds. As far as the inexpensive microphones, I mixed a show downtown. Will Hogue was playing, and I mixed his band with $99 Guitar Center drum mic kit, and it sounded great. It doesn't necessarily matter the microphone; it's how you.
It's the right placement of that microphone.
Placement.
You could have $5,000 worth of microphones, but if your drum set sounds terrible, it's not going to do any good.
Yeah.
I think you'll find that you'll discover a lot about yourself and just what you've purchased.
I've discovered a lot about myself. Recording at home, you track something, you go back and listen to it, and it's like, is that me?
Yes.
I'm playing that?
Yes, it is.
Funny story about that. A buddy of mine a couple of years ago, he sent me a recording. And I'm listening to it, and I'm going, man, that's really good. I had no recollection of ever recording this song. I mean, I had no remembrance of it whatsoever.
It was the 80s, man.
I was like, dude, that sounds great. I said, who's the drummer? and he emails me back. He says, you're an idiot. He goes, it's you.
Oh, thank God.
Thanks, Lisa, for the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Good luck.
This one's got some heat on it.
Oh.
Question 2 Comes from Jean-Clé Basquois on Instagram. Hell of a name.
Yeah. French-Canadian or French?
I don't know.
Or Creole?
Creole. Drum covers are stupid, and so is insta-chopping. Debate the pros and cons.
Because this is actually kind of a touchy subject.
It is quite touchy. There's a lot of guys out there who are posting drum covers and, who love to just get on Instagram and shred.
And there's definitely a place for it. I have never been really good at self-promotion. So that's, doing a drum video is not something in my wheelhouse. It's not something I'm probably ever going to do. And if it means the end of my career, then so be it. But it's not me. I'll post a video of me playing with a band, but I'm not gonna just sit there and for me, this is just for me. When I'm playing drums by myself, I'm playing to better me, to better my playing, and practice to me has always been something that is best done away from other people.
Definitely, I would agree. And there's also the other side of that as well, where guys will post videos of themselves practicing.
Yeah.
And as almost a way to fire themselves up to get better.
Right.
It's like, if I'm going to be posting more videos, I got to be better and post better videos.
And there's nothing wrong with videotaping yourself as you practice, because that is definitely a good tool. I mean, we used to use videotape in hockey all the time, where we would watch tapes of past games or past practices just to kind of fine tune.
Oh, definitely.
And kind of the same idea growing up. They were always telling me, practice in front of a mirror. Okay, where am I going to get a mirror like that? But that's so you can kind of see what you're doing wrong with your technique, and so video is very helpful in that regard. Now, as far as just doing drum covers, I enjoy some of them. I think some of them are really good, but
it seems in the drum cover land, if you go back like 10 years ago, guys that were doing drum covers on YouTube some of them are gone, but a lot of those guys have transitioned into lessons and online studio stuff and that kind of thing. So they switched from drum covers into that kind of thing. I definitely see that as like a gateway into getting your feet wet in the online market.
Well, I think it's definitely a viable form of, and same with the Chops videos. It's a viable form of getting yourself out there in front of people that you wouldn't normally have a chance to get yourself out in front of. And people have done well. People have received deals from manufacturers because of their viewer counts,
or gigs from bands,
or
you cover a band song and that band sees it and their drummer drops out and hey, this guy plays our song great.
This isn't drumming, but I mean the guy that's singing for Journey right now was discovered because of a video that he had up on YouTube, and I mean this guy sounds like Steve Perry.
I think it boils down to what the musician is proud of.
Right.
They're like, I worked really hard on this. I learned a lot from this. I think everyone should see it. And for that, I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
I'm very, very happy that we are in the age of content to where, because, back in the day, it wasn't like we could just, hey, take my video, you should watch it. It's like no one's going to take your VHS, shove it in there, and then give it back. Like those days never existed,
Right.
I remember just floppy disks was a way to swap music, and now there's almost too much content. And I think that might be exhausting to a lot of things because it seems, drums, we don't play melodies, so there is a lot of insta-chopping, as they say. And there's a lot of just fills and not grooves, and you're not playing to a song. I wish you didn't play to a song. There's a lot of...
there's definitely the whole ego side of it.
Exactly.
That's a large side of it.
But as far as... if you don't have or if you're not with a band in the same room, drums by themselves, unless you're Nate Smith, aren't necessarily the most interesting to listen to by themselves.
Or Benny Greb.
I basically learned how to play by putting on the headphones and playing along to songs, which is essentially what the cover videos are. I mean, you're putting on the headphones and playing along to a song that you've learned well enough that you're not going to screw up some of the licks, hopefully, that are being played on the recording. So I kind of get it. You know, it's not for me. It's not something I'm ever going to do. I'm not going to come out with a series of drum covers or anything like that. But I definitely see it as a viable form of getting yourself out there.
Definitely.
What kind of music you into? We'll check out these covers that I just did.
Exactly.
I'm very into these.
Yeah.
I play in a band similar to that. That's cool.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It can lead to work, you know. It can lead to, like you were saying, teaching gigs. It can lead to, you know, all sorts of things.
It can also lead to some thumbs down.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
I don't even want to comment on this.
There's some haters, dude. There's some haters.
Haters going to hate, dude. And
Yeah.
I think it's a little saturated.
Yeah.
I will agree with that. I like to think, and you know, this has always been the case in music. Like you've heard people say, "Oh, it's already been done before.
Yeah.
Don't even try it." I think
everything's already been done before.
I get that. That's a little jaded, and I definitely kind of understand that. But some of these guys are just trying to make a discovery for themselves, and you know, at the end of the day, that's cool.
And it's a way to get better, you know. If you're set on wanting to do drum videos and editing them, so like doing covers and putting those videos up online is a great way to get started. But you know, if that's something you want to do long term, that's something to think about as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Basqua.
Next question.
All right, you want to read this one to Mr. Joseph?
Oh no,
This one comes from our very own Will Grenley.
this one comes from an employee, a great friend to all three of us. He's asking you this, by the way, and you have not seen this question.
I haven't seen any of these questions. So.
Yes, his name is Will Grenley.
Will.
Joe, ice skates or rollerblades?
In my personal opinion, ice skates. Sorry, Marshall.
No, I love ice skating.
Well, I used to manage an ice rink in Charlotte, North Carolina.
We've talked about this.
And I would have to be there like before 5 a.m. because of figure skaters would get on the ice at 5 and start tearing up the ice. Sorry, figure skaters, but
It's a figure skater speech.
yeah. Well, we always used to yell at them for tearing up the ice. They always used to yell at us for tearing up the ice. So it's but
And you were a goalie, right?
yeah,
You played hockey.
I played primarily throughout my career. I played goal. I did play forward a couple of times, but just for fun. Yeah.
So definitely ice skates.
Yeah,
I like
definitely ice skates.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I was managing that ice rink and I had to be there that early, I'd get there an extra hour early. So I'd get there at 3 a.m. and I
Might as well just stay up, dude.
and I had the ice to myself
Just to
for
put
an
on them
entire hour.
boots.
And
I love
I'd
it.
put on my skates and I'd skate for like an hour and a half, and then I'd take off my skates, get on the Zamboni, clean the ice for the figure skaters, and
Does the Zamboni really go that slow?
yes.
Wow.
You have to, otherwise you drive right through the wall.
I actually don't know how a Zamboni works. It really just melts the ice and refreezes it, right?
Technically, yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it puts it. Okay, so
It's a Zamboni.
the Zamboni, what it does, there's a razor blade underneath that shaves a very, very, very thin layer off, and then lays down a very, very thin layer of hot, and I mean hot water, over it, and it uses a towel of sorts. It's a little heavier than a towel, but that's dragged behind there, and there's little valves at the back of the Zamboni that squirt water, and so the water is constantly pouring as you're going along.
And then it refreezes behind you as the ice.
Yeah, and the reason they use hot water is hot water freezes. When it freezes smoother.
It's like when you boil water and make it into ice cubes. Like the ice cubes are super clear.
Yes. Yeah. Zambonis are great. Now I will say what I drove was not a Zamboni. It was an Olympia ice resurfacing machine. Now, and Zamboni is a Zamboni.
More
ice
like a
resurfacing
Zamphony.
That's
It was vintage.
Olympias are still great. They are the official ice resurfacing machine of the NHL. So, but yeah, ice skates.
We appreciate everyone listening to these podcasts in these uncertain times, in this pandemic.
And watching them too.
And watching them, listening to them, quoting them. I hope you guys quote us. That'd be really funny. Send us your questions, comments, concerns, all that good stuff. What should we be talking about, you know? Who should our next guest be? I know we've had a couple of different people in line, but yeah, we want to keep this ball rolling, and we appreciate everyone watching and tuning in and just, you know, being with us in these weird times. I can't stress that enough. I know everyone's not playing music right now, so or seeing shows, which I wish I could be seeing some shows right now, but we're just making the best of it.
If you got the time, shoot us a like, subscribe to us on YouTube. You know, we could definitely use the follow. Stay up to date with the shop. We post pretty much every day, so hit us up there.
Joe, my
senses are tingling.
I feel like I smelled some suds
I
on
can
the
taste
way.
it on the tip of my tongue and the teeth and the lips.
Tip of the tongue, the teeth, the lips. The tip of the tongue, the teeth, the lips. The tip of the tongue, the teeth, the lips.
Do you think any of the people on Letterkenny play drums?
If I had to guess, I'd say Derry's a drummer.
If anything, I would say that Stewart is a drummer.
Stuart.
We love Letterkenny at Forks. Shout out to Letterkenny. So.
What do we got right here? We got some Voodoos.
Yeah, I brought us some New Belgium Voodoo Ranger Imperial IPA, 9%.
9%, dude.
Cheers, boys.
Cheers, fellas.
Cheers, boys.
I love you both very much.
Love you
guys.
guys.
Thank you all to tuning in.
Thanks, everybody.
That's it.
Appreciate you.